Everybody, we're going to go ahead and get started with our work session. Ms. Dowse, I was told as I walked in that today is the day. Now that I'm here at the meeting, you're going to be trying to use a colorful word, handing out cash today. That's what I was told.
I did not get that memo, Mayor.
Yeah. I reminded the Mayor Pro Tem on yesterday that we will not take any money out of reserves, though. Will not happen. So wherever that cash you got coming from, it ain't coming from reserve. All $559,000 of it, which is less than 0.1% of the overall $1 billion budget. Absolutely. That's right. Not this year. Yeah. All right, Ms. Dowse, you can proceed.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Davis and Commissioners. This is our second proposed budget work session, in which is a carryover from last week's or 2 weeks ago, the work session that we had. Please note that I did not receive any questions from you in advance, therefore none have been presented. You have received this presentation both as a hard copy, which is in front of you, as well as by email. The agenda that has been prepared is to go over the FY 22 and 23 expense categories. There were several questions stemming from this area during our last budget session. I'll also go into some proposed new programming for FY 23, as well as we will revisit the transit service conversation. We talked a little bit about that on yesterday, but again, this is a carryover from our previous work session. We will go over the budget amendments in detail, which again was a request, as well as an overview of our fund balance and some decisions that we would want to leave you with today, and then end with our FY 22 budget calendar and set any next steps forward if needed. So the FY 22 budget versus the FY 23 budget shows here some highlighted changes between the general fund and our law enforcement budget. If you notice, some of the key changes I want you to pay attention to would be some increases as a result of our software needs to the tune of about $250,000, as well as our repair and maintenance category for building and grounds. Please note that the maintenance of both our Charles B. Webster facility as well as our municipal building and judicial center has increased. You may recall earlier this year this body approved a maintenance contract from CGL to ensure that the needs of Charles B. Webster would be attended to on a regular basis. That contract has caused this particular line item to increase. As well as we all know that electricity costs have increased not only throughout Richmond County, but the state and presumably the world. Agency appropriations are largely accounted to the $200,000 that's been proposed for the library, as well as you'll see a large dollar increase, which is a transfer out for the Augusta Public Transit to the tune of about $2 million. For law enforcement, the CGL contract with repair and maintenance, we're responsible for some supplies that are needed. And then we all know our fuel costs have increased, which is not great, but it's definitely shown here. And then going along the same lines, our prisoner food and medical increases have shown here. And then back to building and grounds, which is largely attributed to the CGL contract. Some of our new programming that we're extremely excited about presenting in FY 23 include the Supply to Comply Toolshed program, which Director Carla Delaney with Planning and Development talked in great length about this during her presentation last week. This program has been proven successful in San Antonio, Texas, in which it allows the Planning and Development Department to not cite individuals for items in which that they could borrow equipment by way of a voucher, such as cutting your grass, maybe even using a weed eater or a tree trimmer or such, to get some of those types of citations out of the court system. as well as a low-income household water assistance program, which is done largely in partnership with the Georgia Department of Human Services, Department of Family and Children Services. This federal program is specifically designed to assist those families with ensuring that they have healthy drinking water and to defray those costs. The cemetery grounds maintenance being transferred from Parks and Recreation to RCCI solely is an expansion of what we currently do with our cemeteries. Right now, Parks and Recreation is responsible, and then those services are augmented by RCCI. This will pull all of RCCI's current assigned crews from Parks and Recreation to where their main responsibility will be to maintain our cemeteries. The warden has assured me that this will allow him to be able to put more inmates in a concentrated space, as well as have the required supervision that's necessary. Parks and Recreation will still be responsible for maintaining the operational needs of the facility, which will include repairing any tombstones or coping, as well as any maintenance needed to the facility. They will also continue with the day-to-day activities surrounding the opening and closing of graves. And then last but not least, this is a commission initiative to streamline our right-of-way maintenance with our existing Augusta Engineering and Environmental Services Department, pulling those responsibilities from Parks and Recreation. Many of you know that currently Parks and Recreation is responsible for cutting several right-of-ways and medians throughout our community. By providing additional funding to AEESD, that will ensure that those services can be included in some of our existing contracts, as well as be responsible and under the arm of one particular department versus spread throughout two. Transit service levels was largely addressed on yesterday, so thank you to this body for bringing some relief to our community needs surrounding transit service delays. As you recall, you approved the purchase of 3 buses, as well as Augusta entering into an intergovernmental agreement with Athens-Clarke County to borrow an additional 3. While those 6 will be of great help, our current situation is that our transit vehicle count is at 29, with 11 of those vehicles out of service, and this is as of yesterday's date. The plan to expand in South Augusta, we currently have 9 routes, and as you could see here, our ridership spans from January to September 30th based upon our several routes. Our last route study was completed in 2015, and fares have not been adjusted since 2009. That is largely in part to the deficit that Augusta Public Transit continues to run on an annual basis.
Ms. Dowse?
Yes.
Can you stay on that slide?
Sure.
All right, we're going to pause just for a moment. The commissioner from the 4th has a series of questions, and we'll entertain them now.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
We're talking about this funds being transferred. Parks and Rec. The responsibilities from Parks and Rec being transferred to engineering.
Concerning right-of-way maintenance.
Right.
Yes.
So, what type of funds are going to be transferred to engineering to pick up that responsibility?
Sure. We've proposed $500,000 in this budget. However, we have not received all of the funding need. So there may be additional monies coming directly from Parks and Recreation to fund this need.
Okay. So did we have a estimate of what that cost would be, or how did we come up with that number?
That was the estimate. But the estimate was done when the bids have not been received.
Okay.
So we're awaiting the bids.
Okay, so is it my understanding then that isn't there funds from stormwater that went to RCCI for similar purposes, or was that for salaries and whatnot?
No, that was for a different purpose, correct?
Yeah.
Because am I mixing this up? Because I'm trying to.
Right-of-way maintenance might be a little confusing. These are the medians. That might help.
Would you speak into the microphone, please? We can't hear you, Mrs. Williams or
She
Mr.
stated that use of the word right-of-way maintenance may be what's confusing versus medians. For instance, the Green Street median or some of the median at Walton Way and Jackson Road. Median on Broad Street.
Okay. It may be. It just seemed like it was all being put in together. I was just trying to make sure of what monies we're talking about, and because we're moving, seems like we're moving potentially some money from Park and Rec to engineering, some responsibilities from Parks and Rec to RCCI, right?
That's
in terms of cemeteries.
That's
I'm just trying to follow you. Okay. And so for RCCI, with them having primary responsibility now for the cemeteries, where's that money for RCCI coming from? Is that coming out of engineering, stormwater, or what?
No, so RCCI already had crews assigned to Parks and Recreation. They will no longer have crews assigned to Parks and Recreation. Instead, those same crews that were assigned to Parks and Recreation will now be diverted to the cemeteries to maintain the cemeteries.
And where was that money coming from initially? Or where is it still coming from? I just want to make sure.
There is no, it's just a transfer of responsibilities for oversight of the problem. It's not moving money from one place
Okay.
to the other.
All right. Want to make sure. All right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor.
Hold on. One of the things that has consistently happened, at least in my short time here, is that there's been an ongoing request for services. And when the general public shows up and says, well, I want you to spend more time cutting the medians, I want you to spend more time cutting trees, I want to put that responsibility back on this body of what is it you believe is not only the responsibility of local government, but where you want to commit resources to from a departmental standpoint, because you're going to continue to get this and this shifting of responsibilities. This is a long-standing conversation where Parks and Recreation is concerned. They're doing things that they generally don't want to have the manpower to do, let alone the resources. And so just put a thumbtack there. Your line of question is absolutely spot on, Commissioner Mesa. But this is a historic issue for this government, all the way back to '96 when you first consolidated. All right, I'm going to go in the order. I know you're in the queue, Commissioner, but I'm going to Commissioner from the 7th.
Okay.
I'm gonna follow up to his question. So if your 500,000 estimated right-of-way cutting, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So does that mean the 500,000 that was by Parks and Rec now, does that mean their budget decreased by 500,000? Like did we decrease the Parks and Rec budget if we moved it over to engineering?
No.
So what's the new then that means there's new $500,000 in Parks and Rec. What is that being used for?
No, it was never in Parks and Recreation.
So you're saying they just oversighted, they didn't pay for it? This right-of-way maintenance cutting that was by Parks and Rec?
No, so after all of the budget requests came in, there was X amount of dollars in which I was able to propose funding to go to certain places. And that's where the $500,000 came from to fund right-of-way maintenance that's being shifted from Parks and Recreation to engineering. The same as what's funding these new programs that we're proposing.
So who paid for right-of-way maintenance out of Parks and Rec in 2022?
So Parks and Rec's paid for it.
Okay.
As I've stated, because bids have not been received, if additional funding is needed, then that funding will then be proposed to be taken from Parks and Recreation's budget. So as of today, their budget has not decreased to fund this new program. This is a new program.
Okay. I'm a little confused. I'm going to follow you for a second. I'll wait on my other ones because it's more like line item once we're done, sir. I'll wait.
Okay, Commissioner from the 10th.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. With monies being unused, shifted, whatever, can you explain exactly what was it, $6.5 million to hire an outside consultant for Parks and Recreation? Exactly what are they going to do to earn that $7 million?
So the consultant ISM was hired and approved by this body to assist Parks and Recreation with the multiple SPLOST projects that they have planned for the coming years. Those dollars have not been expended and will not be expended at one time, but it will be project driven. So for instance, right now they are working on the Brigham Community Center project as well as some other SPLOST projects that are in the pipeline. And so ISM is assisting with project management services. As you may know, Parks and Recreation does not have a project manager on staff.
Okay, so they're being paid that money strictly for consulting. Is that correct?
More project management services.
Okay. Question.
And I can't speak to if consulting is part of the contract or not. It very well may be, but I do know it's largely in part to project management needs.
Okay, one last question. I was under the impression, as most were, that the Director of Parks and Recreations at one time was the project manager. Couldn't that still be extended to his duties and save that $6.5, whatever it was, $1 million?
I can't speak to that arrangement, sir.
Okay, thank you. That's all, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, sir. Chair recognizes the Commissioner from the 6th.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to kind of piggyback on this question my colleague just asked. Number one, I think ISM, that's a 5-year contract, if I'm not mistaken, but also some of the work Commissioner Mason, Mr. Mayor, if you don't mind, he can correct me on this if I misspeak on this. I think just recently with the issue of the leakage there was mold and stuff was found. You had just recently had some lights and things over there, and ISM was actively involved in getting all of those situations straightened out. So it's a 5-year contract, and it's doing things that need to bring to compliance. My colleague is correct on the right side of Commissioner Clark in terms of Mr. McDowell did used to be the project manager for Splash projects, but now he's in a different capacity as a director. So he has to fill that position anyway. And so there are a lot of specialized things that needs to be done. So just remember that contract is a 5-year contract to get things done. So now back to my questions, Mr. Mayor, to Ms. Dowse. Excuse me. I'm trying to understand too. I think my colleagues too. And you may have to get Ms. Donna help you with some of this because we coordinate. I'm sure we're in the same place. To say, and I apologize. Let me see if I got anything to drink here. Not much. When you say, for instance, when with RCCI, it was just mentioned that there was no money being transferred for the RCCI to take on the cemeteries. When actually, according to the budget, it's about $400 and some odd $1,000, isn't it? And that's because you're going to get some potential some staffing so that you can take the crews through there. So when we say transferred, we think the money follows the workload. So in this instance, it's not $49,000 for that purpose, but we're mainly it's going to be hiring staff so that they can see that, so that money does come out of recreation and go there. Because Ms. Dowse, I'm going to say, I understood, if I'm wrong in that, it seemed though you said, well, I found additional money and I assigned it over here, which is a good thing to do, but for me, I think if that's my understanding is correct, I wouldn't leave that money over here because they don't have any use for that money there. To leave it there, the money should follow the workload. And so maybe I'm misunderstanding of what's being said there.
Okay, so the guards that supervise the inmates that were assigned to, that supervise the inmates on the detail that worked with recreation were already paid from RCCI's
Right.
budget. So that line item, we did attempt to match the expenditure with the program. So what was done in this budget is those guards, and I think there were five guards that were in the regular RCCI budget, were moved down to a line item called RCCI cemeteries budget. So those 5 salaries and benefits were moved out of the regular operations of RCCI down to this program. So there was just a transfer from one to the other. The guard salaries were never in the recreation department. So we have matched up the expenditure with where the program is being operated. There was there was a transfer of some equipment that was assigned to the details. What we've just done is moved it down as well. So we've captured this in a program so that we can specifically identify those costs related to RCCI taking ownership of the maintenance of the cemeteries.
So I knew there's 2 things in about RCCI. I know there was the money that we're talking about now, but you also had another $200,000. I think we had talked several times on the floor about needing to make their salaries comparable to at least the marshal's salary. We know most surely nobody's salary can be comparable to the sheriff's salary. So that's the $200,000 in there for that one, right? That's not that.
Okay.
Because you got two different there.
The salary adjustments for the RCCI guards was managed through Warden Joseph's existing budget. He oops, did I get that wrong? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, you got you got about $449,000. Then you got a $200,000 in there as well.
Hold on a minute.
So let's do this. Commissioner from the 6th, can you take everybody to that page in the budget book?
It's in my head, Mr. Mayor. It's not in your page. I don't do that.
We may have trouble finding that one.
But
then.
you will find I'm right. It's in my head. They don't pay for it.
Get real scared now.
I look at with good reason.
Are you talking about the 444,000?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's on
And then you'll
tab
come
4,
back.
page 3.
Okay.
Which tab, Commissioner?
Tab 4, page 3.
All right, very well.
Middle of the page.
Yeah, you will, for the RCCI's budget, that is a total for, I'm sorry, his total budget. So you cannot see that his salary line item went down. He had some increases his salary for RCCI's line item went down, but he had other expenditures relating to the operations of the prison, mainly the medical contract and the cost of his electricity repairs and maintenance that did not make a corresponding total decrease for the RCCI line item that you would see associated with I'm looking down here for the cemetery maintenance right there, which goes up $444,000. But the cost associated with the guards was a direct flip from the RCCI line item that's on up above the page, further up toward the top of the page. So that was a corresponding, just a flip from one to the other.
Okay, and it's probably the directors here. So let's go back. I'm going to go back to the, and I'll leave it alone after this. The cemetery. From the staffing of the cemetery of a recreation department, how many staff persons at that particular time was the RCCI doing all of the cutting? You had no on staff doing any of that?
Yes, Parks and Recreation did have on-staff persons with the RCCI crews that were able to cut grass, and Director McDowell stated it was about a 70-30 split.
A 70 on whose end?
70 for RCCI.
Okay, okay. And so now they'll just take over like you said, the operations and the grave, the monument fixtures and things of that nature.
That's correct.
Okay, okay. Thank you.
And Commissioner, were you speaking of the salary increases for RCCI?
How much was that?
$260,000, and that's on page 5.
Well, tell Mr. Mayor to get me a hat. It's working.
That was behind tab 5, page 3. 263.80.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. And so my point was just that, if I was thinking one was going to be because two things we've talked about RCCI, and while I'm a fan of RCCI, I think as a commissioner for me, I think we may all have our pet peeves that has been the most beneficial thing to my constituents, from cutting the grass to cleaning the ditches and things of that nature. And I just think if we get, I'm sorry here, we get more bang for our buck with them than anybody else. And that's why I always was advocating for two things: to give them resources to hire more officers, and the commission and the government can get more done, as well as put them in a position to get salary increases. And it seems in one way or another, that may be a possibility here. And that's just why I'm a strong advocate, because I don't think I've been in many ways good to my constituents if those services were not, because that's what's important to them. Thank you.
Thank you as well, Commissioner. Commissioner from the 4th.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In keeping with this RCCI theme, a couple of questions yet. So RCCI will take over the operations of the cemetery,
The maintenance.
maintenance of the cemetery. At the same time, they've got rights of way and ditches.
It's a separate crew. So RCCI has several crews, some assigned to engineering stormwater, some assigned to the Central Services Department, some assigned to Board of Education. And so these crews that we're moving are the ones that were assigned to Parks and Recreation.
Got it. Understand that. So a lot of moving parts here. If I recall correctly, there was some $305,000 plus that was coming from the stormwater fee to pay RCCI. So is that still a true statement as of today?
Yes.
Okay, so stormwater fee. And we're justifying that because of the fact of what?
Those crews.
Coming from the stormwater fee, I mean.
Those crews address only the stormwater needs, right-of-way maintenance, as well as the retention ponds, and other services in response to the stormwater program. Those are not the same crews that we're proposing for cemetery maintenance. Separate inmate crews.
No, I understand that. I'm just trying to figure out the dollars that were assigned for the stormwater fee. If in fact, I believe there's almost $500,000 in ARP funds that was allocated to engineering that have not been unused. I'm trying to figure out why couldn't we allocate that for RCCI versus taking it out of the stormwater?
When the ARP allocation was approved, you are indeed correct. There was a one-time use of ARP for approximately $380,000 to fund the crews that were assigned to stormwater. That was done per the proposal that was approved for one time 2022. So as we go forward into the 2023 budget, that expenditure will be paid from, is proposed to be paid from stormwater, the recipient of those services.
But we have we have not used those ARP funds, correct? There was an allocation of $500,000 to engineering.
It was $380,000 specific to those inmate crews.
Have they been expended?
It is a transfer over to fund that service now. I don't I can't speak directly to how many actual crews were there.
Somebody's going to
You
have
know.
to be able to speak directly to it. I would imagine. I mean,
That would be
we've got to get some
between-
answers.
Between Gordon and the Director of Engineering. So, Yeah.
Well, who can speak to it? Let me, because I can't, put, if you
not me.
can't speak
I don't
to
know
it, that's
where those
fine.
crews were.
But
I know where the dollars are assigned to fund the program.
do we have any other departments heads here? Are we just, Mr. Mayor, what did you? I'm deferring to you, Mr. Mayor. I mean,
There's a movie called Be Cool Shorty. I'm trying to be cool right now because I'm looking at it in the audience and I am looking for department directors. This meeting notice was certainly well published. We included moving it 15 minutes later because of conflict. So let's do this. In all candor, these are questions that need real answers. So I know that we've got some folks taking some notes, and that just means that we'll have to come back and get some more real-time answers. Let me interject this, if I may. I'm going to sound like I'm on a soapbox, Commissioner, from the 9th, but this is a long-standing historical, I'm running out of words, pervasive issue. Since 1996, this government has failed to spend time, energy, and resource on organizational management, okay? And right sizing. You've got this hybridization of work being done. And then when it's not done, folks get upset. I got this new program called Stormwater, but the medians have needed to be cut before there was ever a stormwater program. You got the challenges of, well, let's just put RCCI crews over there, and you got Parks and Recreations doing part of it. And then you confuse it by saying, well, I meant a right-of-way. Well, the engineer's doing that. So at some point, this body's got to stop. Don't worry about the dollars. I think it's more prudent right now to focus on who's going to do the work. And let's focus around the organizational management piece of it of, here's the work that we want done, because what you're gonna have happen before, what's happening now, and what will happen in 2023 is that you will not be able to sustain it because you don't know who's doing the work, and then you haven't resourced it with people first, and then you ain't got the dollars to support it because somebody's gonna come and say, well, I want the trees cut and that's the priority today. So might I suggest hitting the pause button long enough to truly manage the organization of the work piece. Who's going to do this? And so that you put the right dollars where they need to be, as opposed to having chargebacks to departments because you left it over here, but they're doing the work. That's an important piece of work that we never seem to want to do because it doesn't sound like you're solving something. That's the real problem. And if you spend time doing that, we're going to be a whole lot better than we are right now. All right, Commissioner from the 10th.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Speaking of RCCI, doesn't the state of Georgia pay RCCI a certain amount of money to house, I think, 200 inmates a year?
Yes.
Is that money that the state pays, whose budget does that go into, and where is that money reflected, and what is that amount of money?
$22 a day.
Yes, sir, it's a source of revenue as recorded in the general fund, which is the same fund that the expenditures for RCCI are recorded, so they effectively offset a portion of the expenses for operating RCCI. If you'll give me a second, I'll tell you which page that line item is in your revenue budget. I'm looking for my backup.
Commissioner Hassan answered one answer, but I couldn't understand him.
Correct, it is $22 a day, but I was gonna give you the total projected amount just as soon as I find that revenue line item. Prisoner housing fees, which is at the top of page 4, behind tab 3, which is projected to be $1.7 million.
Okay, thank you.
Certainly.
Okay.
Okay.
Commissioner from the 6th.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I just want to say, for the ditches, and some call them drainage ditches, stormwater ditches, or what have you, when stormwater came in place, all those things were transferred to stormwater. And the inmate crew was one of the most economical ways to try to do that as well. So that's why some of those inmates were paid out of the stormwater. You can't do it any cheaper than that. Most of those ditches, if you was to ask Dr. Malik, I think he's in here now, ask him what does it cost if he was to put that ditch on the street versus letting the inmates clean it. So that's what was a part of the stormwater program, that those inmates would be involved in that, and that's where they get the best deal and bang for your buck. That was a part of the stormwater program.
Commissioner from the 7th.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I'm just going to jump into some of my questions because I don't want to be here all day. On tab 4, page 3, the Cyber Center parking deck, can you explain the allocation, 189,400, and how we haven't spent a dime yet, and maybe it's the end of the year expenditure, but like explain to me why it went from 41,000 to 189,000.
Tim Schreier is going to speak to those specifics.
Perfect.
Tab 4, page 3.
Cyber Center, we get a report at the end of the year from Augusta University that runs that for us. So that's the end of the year true up.
Okay, why is it so much more? Is it because the COVID was 2021 and 2020? Is that why it's so much increase? Like,
I'm sorry, let me grab.
I mean, it went 55, 41, 189, and then nothing this year, and I'm just trying to understand it because if you look at your slide over here in a couple, we're looking for 413,000, and we're going to have to find it from somewhere.
What tab, Commissioner?
Tab 4, page 3.
You can use mine, too. Here you go, Tim. See tab 4, page 3.
Oh, okay. That's our budgeted expense, and there's an offsetting revenue to that also.
Okay, and I'm just asking, like, why did it go up so significantly, like 5 times in 21 to 22, and then we haven't spent anything in 2022?
And again, the actuals are presented for 21, 22, or 20 and 21. We won't get the actuals until the end of the year, after the budget is
Okay.
next year's
It-
adopted.
But what would be the factor that you went from 50-something thousand to 189? Can you explain that? Like, why? What was the reason the number jumped $150,000?
It's a budget estimate, sir. I don't recall the details.
And I think, we'll get frustrated for a second here, because I think that's why I'm so frustrated. We hear these budget estimates, but there's no reason for it. I mean, you look, I'll go back up to the top line on page 3. I mean, we're going from 15,000 budgeted to 162,000 budgeted for an additional 147. Like, and then these actuals, and I understand it's end of the year budgeting, but like some of these numbers are not even at 50%. But by the end of the year, we somehow spend it all, and it is amazing to me that this is the way we do budgeting, and yet there's no justification of 150,000 when I'm looking for 413. If you look at the slides here, and a couple slides that we're looking for, so it's just a little bit frustrating as we continue to deal with this.
Well, and Commissioner, I apologize that we were not prepared for you to line by line ask questions pertaining to whatever that particular line
I
item
respect
is.
that, but y'all did the budget. You should be able to justify this. Why? I mean, they've done this so many years that there has to be an understanding of why. I mean, I'm not trying to be disrespectful, but like, I mean,
I
on a
can
jump
speak
of
to
that
the
significance.
I can speak to the driver's license bureau, the one that you just mentioned. That's a new line item simply because, as you know, we are in negotiations with SPC concerning Augusta having to do maintenance for that facility. So that's the reason why that particular line item has increased. But concerning the others, we'll be more than happy to get you that justification.
Yeah. Okay. And I appreciate that. And then
It's
my
not information that we have right now.
my next question is the Fifth Street Bridge. You budgeted $50,000 for it.
That's right.
What do you anticipate that being spent on? And then do you have a revenue with that $50,000, or is there no revenue? And
So the Parks and Recreation Department has been tasked with providing a plan for managing, and that includes event rental, but managing that bridge in conjunction with the DDA. That $50,000, again, is an estimate. The engineering department is responsible for maintaining the bridge. Currently, it's still declared under construction. The construction project has not been completed. And so the $50,000 is proposed for what Parks and Recreation has anticipated their needs for the bridge to be.
but you don't have any revenue coming in 2023 in your mind?
The
Or
revenue estimates have not been proposed.
okay.
But yes, they are proposing to have revenue because they're interested in renting out the bridge.
Okay. Madam Administrator, I have a question. Based on in a couple slides, and if you want to go to it, you can. There's $413,000 that basically is short based on these requests. And I know maybe we can't give it all, but some of it, I think there's passion up here to support some of it. What, in your mind, is the best avenue for this body to find the money that would need to fund these? Is it you come back with a new budget that says, okay, we're going to cut here, we're going to cut here, and we can work this in? Or is this body going to have to meet again and, get the knife to the budget, I guess?
The preferred route is for this body to communicate what they want included as far as amendments or otherwise in the budget, and then allow myself as well as my team to bring a proposed budget back to you.
Okay.
All right, look, Commissioner from the
Thank you.
7th, let me interject for a minute. You're not done, are you? You are? No, I'm gonna give you time to answer more questions, ask more questions. I want to calibrate everybody back to a couple of things. One, our budget calendar. And the first public meeting was on yesterday. This is the second work session. And on 15 November, we will adopt what will then be the commission's budget. It's on the 15th, okay? It's on November the 15th. So between now and 14 November, the key concerns that you have, if we're going to take a line-by-line approach, then let's come armed with those questions in advance. Might I suggest that there's a focus around new programs? There's not only a focus around new programs, but any of the, quote, departmental or agency requested amendments, that you focus your time and energy on those things. And you come back to that third global item that I mentioned, and that is organizational management. Got to decide who's going to do what work. And that'll allow you to true up the budget from that standpoint. But those are the dates I want to keep in front of everybody's mind. Okay? I purposefully didn't mention 7 November, publish of notice of adoption. That's important, and that's the statutory thing. We'll get that done. But just the work at hand should be focused around those things. All right, back to the commissioner from the 7th.
I just think that, I think this body needs a little direction where we can go because, like the new programs, I think it'd be helpful if we had a dollar item next to each one of those new programs. We know some of them, I think, in a screen, like an easy way to read it. But also, there's so many departments where we see increases on, and some of them are technical or IT related. I understand some of them are HR related. Some of them we gave salaries. I get it. But where is it that this body can go and find money here, money there, money here, to where we can support these things that I think are important to some of the people up here. And that's why I'm just kind of asking for a little bit of direction, because I think, it is a big,
Yeah.
you know.
Might I suggest the following? Start with basic service delivery. We have a just and a due responsibility to, as I say it, again, soapbox, provide for the health, welfare, and safety of all of our citizens. And it starts with the basic service delivery and budgeting those. And there's a reason why we've got previous data here. One of the things that I find odd oftentimes is we don't see this in graphical format. It's generally always in tabular format. But if you see the graphs, you have a way of seeing where you've seen increases or decreases, and it makes it a little bit easier to navigate through that. So let's start there. From an engineering standpoint, and I'm gonna talk about the pet peeves that persist up here. Utilities, engineering, environmental services, those pet peeves. That's where you're spending the majority of your money at. On salaries, that's where you're spending the majority of your money at. On people, and then also on the work. And they tend to get everything that they generally ask for, which leads to other complications. So let's start with the core service delivery of this government and making sure that you've budgeted those appropriately. That also might include bringing on additional staff. What I consistently hear that people are not talking about is, how can I cut some money from somewhere else so I can put it over here? I wouldn't encourage you to start there. I would deliver the service first, and then let's see where we have potential resources that can shore up any gaps that you might have. I think your question, and Commissioner from the 7 is spot on, but start with the basic service delivery of the local government first. Ms. Dowse.
Mayor Davis and Commissioners, I want to make certain that you understand that my presentation is not designed to include every program that is proposed in this budget. Tab 6 has a couple of pages in which every program that has been proposed is included. So I don't want you to walk away today thinking that that is it. To include all of the positions that have been proposed, as well as any other changes. And so when the commissioner just stated that he wanted the amounts beside it, the amounts are here because my presentation was just to highlight some of the key programs or some of the programs that would be widely noticed.
That's correct. That's where I'm suggesting, if you want to spend time, let's go there. Level set, service delivery, and then if there's opportunity to expand, then go from there. Okay? All right. I know there are a whole lot more questions. I want Ms. Dowse to complete this, and then I'm going to come back. And I'll come back to you, Commissioner. All right, Ms. Dowse, I want you to complete the presentation. Proceed with that, and then we're going to come back with more questions, okay?
Okay, I think we covered transit.
You're going in reverse order. Okay. All right.
No, I was just bringing you back to where we stopped.
All right.
Okay,
We went through this one already.
right, we covered transit.
Yes.
And so now the requested amendments that my office has received include these 4. These were 3 of the 4. The first 3 were presented to you during our last budget work session. I would like for you to note that the state court judge position was recommended in the proposed budget. However, Judge McIntyre realized that the salary that she originally requested was insufficient and has therefore submitted an increase. The original request for District Attorney Jared Williams was proposed through his existing FY22 funds and therefore did not require an additional allocation for FY23. However, after speaking with him, he clarified his need further to include an increase to his existing assistant district attorney positions to the tune of about $200,000. Commissioner Garrett asked for an additional $50,000. Serenity Mental Health requested $75,000, of which I proposed $25,000, which is consistent with how much funding has been awarded to them in the past. And then we received a recent request from state court, the accountability court, in which they are requesting almost $100,000 to expand their program for 50 additional persons. Please note that outside of RCCI, all requested increases to salary for many departments, and this is also included in your binder, those requests were not included in the proposed budget. We did receive several, but those were not included. Yep, excuse me, pending our compensation study, which was the sole reason why those additional increases to salary were not included. Ms. Williams will now speak concerning our fund balance.
Hey, good morning. We tried to answer some of the questions that came out of the previous workshop related to fund balance. And fund balance, as you know, is your reserves. We particularly usually speak to the levels that are in the general fund, and for purposes of our reporting, general fund and law enforcement are combined. So normal practice is to give you a projected prior end of fiscal year, unaudited version, usually the first quarter of the following year. So we will be able to give you some preliminary results of how 22 wound up in an unaudited form in the first quarter of 2023. We presented an update for expenditures and revenues in the GMA workshop, which was held in August, and there were no major anomalies during that presentation. Target at June would be about 50%, so we were about at 42% on our expenditures. As of September, target would be 75%. Our expenditures are running about 70%. And this is primarily due to our vacancies. The budgeted salaries and associated fringe benefits, which compose a major portion of your operational budget and general funds, are not being expended at the projected rate because we have so many vacancies. As of the end of September, the Sheriff's Department reported that there were 153 vacancies in that department. So that is primarily the reason that the rate of expenditures in that very large salary line item is not at the target. Our revenues are coming in ahead of projection, primarily due to our sales tax collections, which through the September receipt from the state of Georgia are running ahead. If someone's got a crystal ball that can help us know how much of a pullback there will be due to fears of inflation, I'd be tickled to death if y'all would share that with you. But right now we are projecting that those sales tax revenues are still on track, as our last reported to you, to be about $3.5 million ahead of where we budgeted for this year. One of the other items that we address regularly is our number of days that we target for having a reserve for our fund balance. That would be, in very simple terms, if the government did not collect a single dime of revenue for a period of a number of days, how many days could it continue to pay its ongoing rate of expenditures without that collection? So our former target was a minimum of 90 with a target of 120 days. But the outcome of the priorities from a 2021 workshop was that we should increase our target for our reserve to approximately 180 days. As of and that's going to take some time to get there, because essentially you would be doubling your target. If you're moving from 90 to 180 days, and to put that kind of in perspective, where we were at the end of 2021 was a little right at 100 days, and that 100 days equated to $41 million. So if you're going to move from, we are going to move from $41 million, which is 100 days, to add in another 80 days, it's going to take some time and some planning and some effort to get there. Nobody anticipated, or I don't think anybody figured that we could get from where we are to 180 days, essentially doubling it overnight.
We did.
We did? Okay, we did figure that. Okay, so let me leave here and go look for a spare $41 million that I haven't located yet.
It's called time and
Yeah,
management.
Exactly. We need a plan to get there. And that kind of goes to the next level of bullet points that are on this slide. When you have an increase in your reserves, and we did see a larger than normal increase in our reserves in 2021. I can point to one single line item that helped us get to that $5.6 million, is our sales tax collections were on the rebound. And they did. They came back, as you've heard, across the state and just about across the nation. Retail sales and the economy bounded back quicker than really anybody anticipated. So out of that $5.6 million, which was about 3% of the general fund's budget, $4 million of that was the increase in our sales tax collections for that year. It came in ahead of our budget for 2021, as we have continued to project for 2022 and have factored in a growth rate for 2023. Being the financial stewards of your money that we are with our revenue projections, we are typically pretty cautious on revenue projections. So just because 1 month of sales tax may have been 19% above the prior months, we don't have enough data furnished by the state to know if that was due to late reporting or a shift or a penalty or an adjustment, or if we can continue to anticipate that going forward each month. I would not be comfortable standing looking at 1 month's collections and projecting out a 12-month trend. We use a rolling 12-month average to do our projections for our revenue estimates for you guys. So at some point there need to be a few decisions, policy decisions made by this body, is when we have a higher than anticipated increase at the end of the year to our fund balance, do we allocate that all to our newly targeted reserve, or do we set aside a portion of that identified by either a percent or a set amount by this body to address a one-time activity? You know, there is a particular program, there is a particular need that this accumulation of an increase in your reserves needs to be directed towards. It's a one-time problem, it's a one-time fix. You don't ever allocate your reserves to fund an ongoing stream of expenditures. That's not a sound fiscal practice. You need to target your expenditure level with your current anticipated level of revenues. And then, as we all know, the available source of funding from ARP will cease as of the end of 2024. So while we are accumulating these increases to our fund balance, do we reserve, do we restrict a portion of those funds as a policy decision in preparation for the demise of the ARP funding? again, that is a discussion that is much broader probably than today. I'll be happy to, we can set up a workshop, we can do any number of things, we can come back with some recommendations to you. So at this point, take any questions that you may have for me.
Okay, we're gonna go back to the questions. And, I know I've got the commissioner from the 6th in the queue. I think that may have been the order that it was in.
Yes, sir.
I had told, okay, all right, very good. Commissioner from the 6th, then the 4th.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Ms. Donna, can you go back, because I'm gonna come back to this slide, but let's go back to the slide where you had the request from the courts. Right, thank you. Most of the courts, and you got, yeah, okay. So this is for my colleagues here. As we know, the courts were pretty much shut down for over a year and a half, across the state or across the country potentially. And so my question is, and what is not here, also, we can say the solicitor's office not here, and those kind of things of that nature. Do we want to, when we have another budget work, if we have another one, to bring them in and let them speak to this, or do we want to find a way to consider this? That's one question, to do this the way as it exists, as the ask is on the table. And what is not here is what the young lady, Ms. Donna, was presenting about yesterday. Ms. Donna Marion yesterday was from the Public Defender's Office, which was an additional $80,000. That's what she was talking about yesterday. I think Ms. Dawson said they might have got it when they sat down with them, but it didn't make the cut as a part of this budget amendment. It didn't come through that process. And then go back to the slide that you were on, Ms. Donna, when I started talking. So that's one question. The second question is, at the directive need from the commission, bullet point 2, should a portion be set aside to address commission initiatives that are, you say one-time activities, but I don't know whether it be one-time activities. I don't know how you define that, But my point is, what kind of money, you might have just said that, Ms. Donna, but what kind of monies are we talking about that could potentially fund these court issues that's put before us? What kind of money are we talking about do we have? You might already say it, and I apologize if I missed it.
Okay. These, if I can address that, one time is exactly that. You need to replace a chiller in a building that's gonna be $500,000. You need to make a splash pad, yeah.
Okay, I got
You
it
need to
now.
do something one time.
So it doesn't have,
Salary increases are not one-time expenditures. Salary increases are ongoing expenditures.
okay, but how much money are we talking about here that can consider that? Because look at what I'm looking at right here. We're right at about even if you put in the $80,000, you may be looking at about $550,000 here that's on the screen. 550,000.
413.
413. And with the 80,000.
It's 413,000. I added it together. 623.
Okay.
But there would not be, the only two items that I would consider one-time expenditures.
No, I know it's not.
Yeah, funded from fund balance would be the increase for Serenity and/or the one-time expenditure for an expansion in accountability court. The accountability court is funded by its fees as well as a $200,000 augmentation from the general fund already. So this would essentially be a 50% increase.
Okay. So can we take off that final line on that bullet point, saying one time, and once again asking what kind of money we talking about? In the money that you're talking about, that fund balance that you have, and this is not our reserve fund balance, I'm sure.
Yes, sir, it is.
It is?
Fund balance is your reserve. Those
Okay.
two words are interchangeable.
Okay, they're interchangeable. Okay. All right, then, yeah, that answers that one then. What is the industry standard for the amount of days for government outside? Of course, we set the 180, Mr. Mayor, by your leadership, and I think it's a good thing. But I'm just asking, from an industry standard, what should that fund balance look like for us? And that's whatever you want it to be?
45 is about the minimum that is really acceptable to anyone. GMA will tell you 90 to 120 is where most folks are. 180 is probably the next most popular. It really depends on the organization itself and its stream of revenue. If all of your revenue comes in at one time during the year, you're going to need a higher number of days of operating fund balance because it's just cash flow. If you are more structured like Augusta, which we are very fortunate that some of our major revenue streams are spread out more evenly through the calendar and fiscal year. Now, we do have our property taxes that come in at a clump during the year, but our revenue stream in the general fund is conducive to being able to operate on a pretty steady cash flow basis. So 120, 90 always worked well for us. 120 is fine. We will get to 180.
Okay.
I don't see any need for Augusta to go above that level in our current financial situation. Obviously, we struggled after the ice storm. It took a huge dip. We spent the next 5 years building it back up. And we are in one of the healthiest positions that we have ever been in currently.
So, Ms. Donald, so when I asked about that for clarity for me, when I asked about what would the additional funds look like, I heard you consistently mention we are going to be about $3.5 million from sales tax than we projected. And so that's what I'm really inquiring about. That are you already putting it in the fund balance, or did I misunderstand your statement?
The way that works is your fund balance, it moves one time a year. It moves when you close your books at the end of the fiscal year. So that's the reason that we focus during the year on what our current level of revenues and what our current level of expenditures are. And we can give you, like I just said, we are fairly comfortable that our sales tax collections will come in $3.5 million ahead of your projected budget. However, if you'll remember, we obligated a portion of those proceeds to fund the retention plan that kicked in for this year. It kicked in for 7 pay periods, October the 7th. So our salary and benefits expenditures will be higher from October through December than they were through the first 9 months of the year. So that incremental level of expenditures kicked in October the 7th.
Should we be considering a hiring freeze other than other than places like the sheriff's department and stuff like that?
No, sir. We've got, as I said, we've got so many vacancies right now that departments are being impacted by not being able to have enough folks to come in here and do the work. So you don't need a hiring freeze because we essentially can't hire the people right now.
Well, Attorney Brown, I got my final question to Attorney Brown. Attorney Brown, this is gonna get me run out of town, but I'm gonna ask it anyway. And I'll ride with one of my colleagues to the city line. Historically, when you look at our sheriffs, it tells you with those constitutional officers in particular, you cannot do anything to hinder them from being able to do their duty. It also says throughout the government pretty much when you give them their budget, is their budget at that particular time. So now we are setting the budget. If you cut 53 of these positions at this stage of the function, are we within our right to do that?
Commissioner Hassan, I cannot speak as to that number 53, but I can answer your question.
Go ahead.
I think your question is, can you reduce the positions?
Right.
You can, your obligation, not personally, but as a commission, your obligation is to provide sufficient funds for the sheriff to carry out his constitutional duties to provide law enforcement services to the county. If the budget that you provide him is insufficient, in the opinion of a court, the court will will find you in violation of law. What that number is, depending upon what the sheriff needs as the commission estimates that need. Hopefully, it will be done in consultation with the sheriff. I think as a matter of
Respect.
management prudence, that this body will not unilaterally decide what the sheriff needs, but to do so after maybe its administrator or committee of the commission converse with the sheriff in terms of our financial needs as well as his law enforcement obligation, and hopefully come to an understanding.
Okay.
But you can cut his budget if the budget that you have allows him, the one that you provide him, allows him to carry out the duty.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. That's me, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Commissioner from the 4th.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and keeping with your thought process there of managing and planning, which I think is at the crux of what we need to do in a more proactive way. I guess I should have prefaced everything with this question. What is the continuing costs that will need to be covered in the general fund by the ARP funds that we're using? What is the plan to do that? Because I don't want to get to a point of I don't even know what to call it, but I don't want to get to the end, you know, and then we haven't thought this out. I want to be, in other words, I want to be proactive versus reactive. So not only I know do you take your direction from this commission, but we also look to you all that sit in these particular positions to have some courses of action, whether it's A, B, C, and D, and then the commission can, you know, have something that they can look at and make good educated decisions about, not just something for the commission to say yay or nay on, or for us to come up with it ourselves, but we're looking to you, those experts that are in this particular area, to give us some ideas of the costs that we've now incurred, that will be ongoing, that we will need a continual fund site for, and then what is the plan to cover that?
Okay. Let me answer this in two sections, if you don't mind. Most of the ARP allocations were specifically, the majority of them were one-time allocations. The Vax Up program, the blight reduction, all the other ones that are itemized on that program. The ongoing costs relate to what we refer to as the $15 per hour ARP supplement. That is an ongoing cost that will need to be absorbed in the ongoing funding streams in 2025. I don't want to throw that number off the top of my head because right now I cannot remember it. I can get back to you on that one. I can tell you that the highest impact of that action fell to the fire department. They are already constrained because they only have two revenue sources between their property taxes and the insurance premium tax that comes from the state of Georgia. That will be a challenge among the other ones faced by the fire department to identify where their capital needs are funded from. So I can get back to you on the ongoing cost of ARP. As it was presented, we, of course, as you know, have typically experienced increases in revenue to some degree each year, both from your increases in your digest, your property taxes, and from your sales tax growth and a few other odds and ends. The plan, when it was adopted at that time, was that by the time that you got to 2025, that the gradual increases from those revenue sources would be sufficient to cover that small pool of ongoing expenditures. So we are monitoring that, the reason this last bullet is on there is, do you set aside a portion of your fund balance in the general fund to mitigate what may happen if those anticipated increases in revenue aren't sufficient to cover what you have committed to. Mr. Donald put forth a worst case scenario that if you could not fund it, then it goes away. I don't, that's another policy decision. But from my point, financial planning, that would be my recommendation, is that we continue to look for being able to fund those through our increased source of revenues, and to have a fallback plan should that not work well. If you have an economic downturn that makes your sales tax collections go again, we don't know.
Well, I do think it's important to have multiple methods or multiple courses of action looked at, the viability of those, and have them in place. When one fails, if we only have one, then we all fail. But if we are proactive in our thought process and try to figure out exactly where it is that we're going here and have multiple plans of action, then the probability of us seeing success becomes greater. If not, the probability of failure, which in my mind is not an option, should be taken off the table, and us having multiple ways. So, Mr. Mayor, I just believe that, and I'm finished here, I believe that when you talked about sound fiscal practices, Donna, and Mr. Mayor, you talked about the importance of managing and planning to get us to where we need to be. I hope that that does not fall on deaf ears, because as you've mentioned, we've gone down this road for far too long, and I believe that much of it could have been avoided through proper planning and proper management. I think it's imperative that we know, because I know I'm having a hard time. Maybe it's because I'm the last one that came up here, but I'm having a hard time figuring out who to call for certain things. I started calling people. We don't do it. Parks and Rec do it. Parks and Rec, we don't do it. RCCI do it. We don't do it. Engineering does it. Well, who does it? Because that makes it so much easier for us to be able to operate, not just as commissioners, but as a body. And the citizens are getting migraines, calling all over the place, trying to figure out, what to do. They'll call 311. They say it should be done within 45 days. Then I get phone calls. It's been 4 months and nothing's been done. I hope that as we continue to move forward, and as we begin the new operations beginning in January as well, that we look very, very seriously of how we operate. And if that means, and it should mean, us very clearly understanding the designation of who has what responsibility. And make it easier on ourselves. I don't know if this confusion is intentional or just unintentional, but either way, it doesn't work well. And I just believe that we can do better, Mr. Mayor. And so that planning and managing is utmost important. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, sir. Chair recognizes Commissioner from the first.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Administrator Dowse, can you go back to the recommended adjustments slide? So would it be in order? I'm going to piggyback off of what Commissioner Hassan mentioned earlier about having these court officials come in to our next workshop. Would it make more sense to do that, or would it just make more sense for the commission to just sort of direct today to accept these recommendations and you present a budget with those recommendations reflecting that wish? What would you suggest the forward motion to get a handle on these adjustments, these amendments?
So, Commissioner, these are not my recommendations. These are amended requests from these individuals. And please note, while these are just the requests that we have received after the proposed budget was presented, there's requests that were not proposed. So if it is this body's will that you would like to have any of these amendments or any other requests that were not included, if you can direct me as to which one of those you want included, I would prefer to have the time to go back, adjust the budget, and bring you back a proposed budget to include those item specifics that you're interested in.
Okay, I know that we can't vote here, but I feel like there's an appetite to attempt to adhere to these amendments. I feel like there's some sense of an appetite to go forward. The only question that I do have is, I know at our last session, we talked about the district attorney's office asking for reclassification of 17 positions. And I asked, like, what could we afford if we couldn't afford the 17? Could we also keep that in mind when you bring this back? I do think, like I said, that we do have an appetite to want to see these positions, see these adjustments. But can we also keep into consideration, like, if we can't get all 17 positions upgraded, how many can we with our current budget, with the proposed budget? And then secondly, we mentioned the solicitor's office. What budget request did that office have? Because I know that it hasn't really been discussed much, which I guess is what Commissioner Asad was saying. She may need to come by and talk about it. But I guess just to kind of try to keep from doing this over and over, we need to just go ahead and give a direction.
So before you answer that, Ms. Dowse, and you can be thinking about what you're gonna say. I'm gonna pose this question to the Commissioner from the first, and perhaps you as well, Ms. Dowse. With regarding reclassification of positions, I think the more germane question is, are any of those positions currently vacant? And if so, how many of them are proposed to be filled? Simply reclassifying, is it not true, is a paper exercise, but the actual filling of those positions and then funding them is a little different from the standpoint of, you want to make sure, yeah, we budget for it, but the question of the day is, are these currently filled positions?
So of the 17 positions that the Assistant District Attorney has, 6 of them are vacant as of Monday.
Okay.
Okay.
So 6 out of the 17 are
Vacant.
vacant.
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Commissioner from the first?
Yes,
Still?
sir. So yeah, my question still, that's a great point to make, Mr. Mayor, but I think the question is still there. I really want to know, like, if we know that only 6 are vacant, what can we do with the number of positions that are occupied as far as reclassification goes? And maybe that's just something that you bring back to us next session.
Yes, I can bring that information back.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Commissioner from the 7th.
Thank you, Mayor. In that same vein, I don't know if the library, it was discussed up here. I don't know if there's appetite for that, but that was one that was discussed up here as well. My question is to the fund balance. Can you go back to that page for me? And Ms. Donna, you said it was 41 million, which equals 100 days as of 2021. That number doesn't change until you like drop back in the end of 2022? Or?
Right. It gets recalculated at the end of each fiscal year. The 41 million is, like I said, approximately 100 days. Easy math, it's about $450,000 per day. Each additional $450,000 gives you another day's worth of fund balance.
Gotcha. And how much did this government agree to ARP fund balance in next year's budget? I feel like we allocate dollars towards it, or did we not?
Are you talking about revenue replacement?
Yes.
Oh, okay. It's 4.5-ish.
And what was that, I guess, put in there for?
Okay, the largest chunk of that, there not specific line items, but as we have identified before, the largest chunk of that was $3.2 million that was used to give salary increases in the sheriff's department. That is an ongoing expenditure, and that $4 million from ARP was identified as a revenue source that would allow that program to be funded.
So basically 3.2 is spoken for, the other 1.3 will go back into the fund balance. Is that
There was
accurate?
there was some additional there's 4 or 5 things that have been communicated a couple of times, and I'll find that email and send it one more time. But the 3.5 was the biggest number on there. There were a couple other small ones that
Yeah, okay, that's fine. I mean, I'm trying to find, you know, if we need 350,000, 450,000, 550,000, like I'm trying to find an avenue to where we can find it.
I mean, I'm not, if y'all will tell us where you want to go, tell us what the programs you want to fund, we will be more than happy to come back with a recommendation that will allow you to do that. I mean.
Yeah, I'm only one up here, but I mean, I think there's an appetite, like I said, for that page a couple pages ago, and I think the only other thing that really has been discussed is the library, other than what's not up there, and maybe it's Superior Court, Commissioner Johnson just mentioned, but like, I guess some of the areas where I see a lot of procurement, other ones that just significant increase, I don't know if that's all salary increases or program increases or what, but I mean, I think that at the end of the day, like, some of these we need to do, but I worry about the following year because if you fund them, then, I mean, I feel like we're headed towards a tax increase in the next year's budget because we're not going to be able to fund them with ARP funds, you know, after that year. So, okay, thank you. I mean, that's where I'm at about it. I think that we need to find the money for the library and what's on the screen. That's kind of where I'm at. Thank you.
Mayor
Thank you.
Davis, can I please ask for clarification?
Sure.
Commissioner Frankton, you mentioned the library. The library was proposed at $200,000. Are you suggesting
There was multiple
more
entities
than
up
that?
here that talked about an additional 100,000 because it was never right sized when they went into the building. I think as maybe Commissioner Son and Commissioner Mayor Pro Tem maybe even mentioned it. I think that we just need to have that discussion. I don't know if it's feasible, but I think we need to do it right if we can. So that's where I'm at. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, sir. Good morning. I'm in your book behind tab 4, page 5. And it's probably just a simple explanation. It's just that the numbers are different. Are you with me?
Yes.
Okay. I'm looking at Warren Road budget, looking at 2023, 300,000, but across the board, 2020, 242,000, 2021, 250,000. I look down here at Diamond Lakes, 400,000, 500,000, 582,000 for 2023. Page 5, behind tab 4. Page 5, behind tab 4. And then I look at Newman Tennis Center, 253,000, 341,000, 429,000. And then I look at Fleming. I was out there with those guys the other day. They do a lot out there. And Fleming has 14,000, 18,000, 23,000, 14,000. So what are these budgets made up of? Why is you got one recreation center budgeted for so much more and others so much less? You know, maybe I'm going down the wrong foxhole, but can you tell me what's going on with those? And why is it Fleming Tennis Center given more, budgeted with more money? And I don't know, does Newman Tennis Center have that much more activity than Fleming? That they get that they get $240,000 more than Fleming does?
So a couple of things. One, you mentioned Warren Road. I can speak to the increase for most of your facilities, especially the older facilities, from a maintenance and repair standpoint, as well as electricity has also increased. I cannot speak to the budget request for Fleming Tennis Center. However, Newman Tennis Center does host more of your tournaments as well as have membership fees from a revenue source. So that can attribute to that. Again, the line item specifics that you're asking for, we can't speak to each one of those directly, but I do know, did you ask about the aquatic center? The aquatic center had a maintenance, the aquatic center.
I did look at the aquatic center.
Okay, the aquatic center had a maintenance contract from the recent upgrade of the utility, of the HVAC system and the dehumidification system. But there was another one that you mentioned.
All of these are under control of the recreation director. He can move
Yeah,
funds
the-
to where they need
yeah,
to go
that's true.
for each center.
That's true. If there is, and what what Director Williams just stated, if there is a need from one center to another, the Parks and Recreation Director can request a budget transfer if there was a need and that particular park did not have sufficient funding.
And I'm not seeing Henry Brigham specifically, period.
Yeah, Henry Brigham is at the top of page 5, the
Yes.
ceramics and the senior center, as well as the nutrition center.
Yeah, but it's completely different from gymnasium and,
Yeah, so there's another line. item.
Yeah, it should be. And also note that their budget was significantly reduced because they're expected to be under construction for a large portion of 2023.
I'm just, I guess I'm asking, this needs to be looked at because you had some great disparities here.
The middle of page 4 for Henry Brigham as well, that's your largest portion to the tune of about $250,000.
So is,
But commissioners, also note that your department directors are the ones overseeing your maintenance and operations of each and every last one of your departments. And so the budgets that they request show their projected revenues as well as their projected expenses. They are aware or should be aware of each of these details surrounding their budgeted requests.
so just in general, this includes lights and water. And
Absolutely. It's their full operating budget. And so if they're proposing to increase services at the senior center or host a ceramics program after school, those dollars would be included here.
Some of these facilities have full-time people. Some of the recreation facilities have full-time people assigned to them. As, I was looking up the, difference between Fleming and Newman. There are several full-time employees at the Newman Tennis Center as well. There are none assigned specifically, to Fleming.
And if you recall earlier this year, Fleming Tennis Center was funded via a separate funding source, particularly from Mock Academy.
Academy operates.
So that would not be included in this operating budget.
All right, let me ask my next and last question. What are we gonna do about trees this year? There's not much money cutting trees.
So the engineering department has a on-call contractor for trees and maintenance services.
My understanding is that there's not very much money there.
It was what he requested, right? How much did he request? Yeah, he received a, SPLOST line item for trees and maintenance.
What page is that?
SPLOST is not in this budget. It's not line item.
Mayor Pro Tem, do you know how much money we need to cut trees?
Probably about a couple of million. I know we won't get that.
Why do we need $1 million to cut trees?
Well, I'm saying we probably won't get that, but I got trees on Barton Chapel Road that's leaning over across. I'm being facetious.
I know you are. I'm just, I
Got
mean,
the people
I'm
calling But
Going back to,
But I know that's something that we always ask about. We ask about trees. I'm just trying to make sure that we've got money in there in case we need that. Probably about 200,000 or 300,000, probably.
do we have data to back that up?
Well, I know we get calls all the time. I know we just paid out almost, what,
Lawsuit.
$207,000 for trees falling on folks, and I did have somebody else that called me saying that a tree fell on his car. So we may get that one, but I don't think he was injured as much.
Yeah.
So were you guys able to locate that?
Yes, concerning trees, the
Yes, ma'am.
department did request $1 million for one-time tree removal services, and that was not recommended in this budget.
Okay, so what will they have?
They have SPOS dollars. I don't know exactly how much they have, but I know previous SPOS dollars did include funding for tree maintenance.
Can you, and I'm not trying to run you up the road, but can you get it off the bottom of your head, not the top of your head, your bottom of your head?
I can get that information to you.
Appreciate it. All right, when you send it to me, will you send it to all of the commissioners? 'Cause
Sure.
I want them asking me about it.
Sure.
Okay. Can you do that sometime soon?
Sure, I can have that to you today.
I appreciate you.
All right, Chair recognizes Commissioner from the third.
Would it be, for the 2023 SPOS that there's only 50,000 for trees
I can't speak to that
allocated?
at this moment, but I'll forward that information to the body today.
Okay, thank you.
Chair recognizes Commissioner from the first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A quick question for our administrator. On page 5 under tab 4, there's a section miscellaneous parts. Can you tell me what that means? Because there's $328,000 allocated to that.
Yeah, that's all the little passive and pocket parks that don't have an electric bill, that are so small that we just need to clump them together instead of, as you see, there's about 40 different line items with various parks identified. There are some of them that require so
Yeah,
little activity that they're just clumped together after a port.
okay.
Commissioner, if
Yes.
you recall during our recent parks
hit that.
tour,
Yep.
that we
was on my
actually
way.
showed you several of those that we consider pocket parks.
Okay, and with that being said, I know we had a conversation about divesting in parts, right? We had some parts that we didn't, that folks aren't using as much. And I guess my question is, if we get down the road and decide that we do want to divest in certain parts, these dollars could be reallocated somewhere else down the line. We could amend the budget after divesting happens, correct?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Okay.
Commissioner from the seventh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to suggest that we meet one more time on Monday at 10 a.m.
That's what I was gonna suggest as well. 10 a.m. Monday morning, 7 November.
Hold on a second. Can we split that? Can we go meet?
No, we'll get you breakfast. We'll get you breakfast. Just come on in and we'll get you coffee. We'll get you breakfast and coffee. Go to bed early on Sunday night. 10 a.m. Monday morning, okay? Madam Administrator.
Commissioners and Mayor Davis, to ensure that we are able to provide you with as much information as possible to the level of detail that you are interested in, please forward any questions you may have or feel free to give me a call. I will do my best to reach out to you, but in the event that I am unable to do so, please forward that information.
And you must remember that the mayor said you all will provide breakfast on Monday.
Chair recognizes Commissioner from the sixth.
Mr. Mayor, I think yesterday Judge Willis Saunders was in here yesterday as well, so I don't know what his ask was. He said it wasn't going to be today. He gave that detailed information to the administrator. Did he give you anything, a number?
So he has not presented an amended request. He
Okay.
did, however, submit an original request of which a portion of his original request was funded, just not everything that Judge Saunders requested for juvenile court.
So when he spoke to you yesterday, he didn't give you any idea what he was going to be, what he wanted?
he wanted everything that he did not receive.
And I think the number he mentioned, Mr. Commissioner, was about 80,000 or something
That's
of that
pretty
nature.
good. Okay.
Monday, 10 a.m., November 7th.
Thank you.
A date certain, a time certain. Thank you.
I don't know why y'all gonna have the same question. Oh, I didn't mean to say that. Oh,